Hey, oh, hey, my name is Annette, and I am here for Word on the Curve podcast. Thank you for joining me here this evening. Shout out to my producers, Frank and Christina Essa. They're making moves and they're doing things. But I want to welcome you tonight. And again, if this is your first time here, thank you for joining me. If you're returning, welcome back. Good to have you. Tonight, our podcast is about family trauma. And this is not for the perfect families. This is for families like mine who lived a normal life with some disruption. In the meantime, green tea, it's good for you. Water, moisturize your feet, hands, and face, and mind your business. That's important. Drink up. I didn't always drink green tea. I just really started drinking green tea because they said it was good for me. But let's get into this because we don't have a lot of time. And this is what the podcast is about, family trauma unspoken, because most often it is. We don't talk about it, but we carry it everywhere we go. And I've often shared, and what gives me the authority to share about this is that I was in the social work area for over 40 years. I know the landscape. I'm also a parent who's been parented and grew up in a family. I have many certifications. I am a specialist in addictions, certified specialist, and I've had the opportunity to work with people and mentor and coach. And so I bring a little bit of experience to this discussion. And I'm going to talk about people, places, and things that I've experienced myself as well as with others. So this isn't all about me, but all of it impacts people like me, right? And so here we go, right? We don't talk about it, but we carry it from unspoken resentments to generational silence. Y'all know about that, right? The unspoken rules and resentments in families. You know about the whispers through how we love, how we react, and how we protect ourselves. You know about those things, right? You know about the peeling back the layers. Oh, if this hot tea spills on me, I'm going to be in trouble. Why isn't this top sticking? Oh, geez. Give me a second here. Top on my tea is acting up. And it's going to act up. So I'm going to have to take the top off. And this tea is hot. So excuse me as I move around. Trying to navigate the tea and the podcast. Again, thank you for joining me, right? So we're talking about those generational things. We're talking about unspoken. We're talking about peeling back layers, right? On what's been passed down, covered up, and swept under the rug. Now, some of you are not going to understand this. And again, as I so often request, what doesn't apply, please let it fly. But we're talking about the dysfunction that we normalize, and we do normalize it. And we're going to get into it a little bit. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but we do normalize it. The silence we inherit. You know about inheritance that applies to trauma too. Not always working to the best of us, but it applies to us. And that's a reality. We can't escape that. So if you've ever felt guilt for setting boundaries or confusion about why certain wounds still sting, this one's for you. So welcome. And again, thank you for joining me. So tune in, speak up, and heal forward. Here we go. The family trauma unspoken. I want to make 3 points about this, right? Family trauma doesn't always look loud. It doesn't. Sometimes it's silent. It can be live in silence and tradition, or the things, we were told never to talk about. Do any of you remember that? The things we were told never to talk about? And I'm going to share a little bit about what my trauma was because I had a normal family. We grew up, we didn't always disagree. I had a very normal family. Some might say dysfunctional. I'll say normal because the reality of it is we dealt with our reality. And so, take it or leave it. What doesn't apply, let it fly. You know, Unhealed family wounds show up in how we love others. It shows up in how we parent our children and how we see ourselves. Talking about family trauma isn't betrayal, it's the beginning of breaking cycles and finding peace. That's right, breaking cycles. I've had a few. I don't know about you, but I've had a few. So, as we talk about breaking cycles, right? And this is for us normal people. This is for us people who had families that didn't always get along. This is for, I love big hair. Yep, you guys know that, but I'm getting ready to cut all my hair off. And I don't mind switching up and changing my hairstyles. I'm very comfortable with that. It's what I like, it's what works for me. And it depends on my mood. And so tonight, I'm liking big hair. Um, so, as we talk about family wounds, right, there are three life examples. A woman raised to keep the family business in the family struggle to speak up and not speak up about childhood emotional neglect or hurt. Any of you ever had that? Don't tell listen, my mother was clear. What goes on in my house stays in my house. And listen, she meant that. And we abided by that 100%. And not that we were hiding anything. Her position was my business is my business and it belongs in here. Keep it here. Emotional neglect. Any of you guys know about that? Yeah, that's real. Another example is a man realizes that his fear of conflict stems from watching his parents argue and fight all the time. Now, my parents didn't argue and fight all the time. All right. And so a lot of stuff, you know, um, they made appear as if there were no problems at all, when in fact there were. It's called life on life's terms. And as I grew older, I came to understand, realize, and respect. So he doesn't speak up about his emotional neglect. He doesn't speak up about conflict because his parents fought all the time. And there's a lot of you out there, your parents fought day and night, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. They were fighting. But for those who were fighting physically, you know what it was like to be in that house. Now, my brothers and sisters and I used to fight, and I was the youngest one in the house. So, of course, mom and dad ain't home. Learn how to take a punch. Brothers, you can't get enough of them, right? So, family business, family secrets. Siblings carry resentment into adulthood over unspoken favoritism. Now, here's what I found out. We're talking about family trauma, right? That my twin always thought my mother favored me, and I always thought my mother favored her. Go figure. And we dealt with that as twins growing up. And she had a serious resentment about it, and so did I. But everybody said I was my mother's favorite. My mother took good care of me, but I didn't see that. I thought my sister, my twin, my love, she's gone now. Quinette Keys was my mother's favorite. She didn't see it that way. So that resentment carries on and it doesn't go away. And here's what I want you to know tonight. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not. I'm a mentor. I am a coach. I have experience in the area from social services, from my life, it's living life on life's terms. And so the greater message here tonight is every family has some trauma. Whether the dad was stepping out, the mom was stepping out, whether they were arguing and fighting, whether the bills were long and the food short, there are times when every family experiences some trauma. And for those of you who didn't, God bless you. I know of a few folks that, now when they talk about their families, they talk as if, oh, it was so great. And this was this, and we did this, and I was there. It wasn't like that. But we fix things as we move along so that we'll feel better. And fixing things to feel better doesn't erase them, they still exist. And those are what we call childhood hurts. And family trauma plays a huge role in that. It does. I'm telling you, I grew up with a mother and father who, as their youngest girl in the house, and I was a twin, but she reminded me often, my twin sister, that she was born 3 minutes before me. So she was my older sister. But I grew up thinking that what my parents showed me, what my mother and stepfather showed me, was what life really was. And it wasn't. There was no perfection. They wouldn't argue around us. That's not normal. And so when I'm around people, this is my trauma, who fight and argue, my stomach tightens up. I get nervous when I see, a man and a woman arguing, like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be doing. But that's reality. That's life. People argue. They have disagreements, right? So I grew up never really seeing my parents argue. That wasn't healthy. I'm telling you, because they did argue. They hid it. I grew up thinking a lot of things. For example, we were from very humble beginnings, right? And so my mother was serious about dinner, about washing dishes, about keeping her house clean, about clutter, about cleaning up, about being sanitary. And so I carried that on. My mother, every night after my sister or brothers or one of us swept the kitchen and mopped the floor, my mother cleaned the broom and the dustpan. And I still do that to this day. My mother cleaned her refrigerator as needed, but the deep cleaning was once a week. And baby, everybody participated. I carried that into adulthood. You know, um, I had family crises where there was addiction running rampant. I carried that into adulthood. I'm afraid to do certain things. I don't want to take medications because I don't want to have a problem with it, right? So we carry our childhood and the things that happened in our childhood into adulthood. There's no getting around that. And for those of you who can get around it, good luck, because I'm going to tell you what worked for me. What worked for me was dealing with things, the childhood hurts. What worked for me was dealing with the reality that people don't always get along. What worked for me was dealing with the fact that my mother was a clean freak, and so am I. And a lot of people that I dealt with resented that, but it wasn't going to change who I was. I toned it down a bit, but I want a clean house. I want my refrigerators, my counters, my tables, my floors. I want to disinfect the kitchen and the bathrooms every day because that's what she taught me. I'm comfortable with that. If you're not, you don't live here. And for those of you who have, deal with it. Maybe you'll learn some things. I had to acknowledge and not deny the things that impacted me. I like order. I like understanding. I was raised with this motto: understanding is the best thing in the world. From my stepdad. I believe that. I believe it wholeheartedly, even today. If we disagree and we can come to an understanding, that's good. If we can't, I'm going to move on and move away. What I'm not going to do is tolerate misunderstanding, miscommunication, uh, miss whatever, miss me on that. Because I was raised to understand that understanding is the best thing in the world. And listen, there are things I had to stop doing to gain my peace, right? The other thing I had to do was create boundaries that protected the healing, even with people I loved. I had to protect my healing process. I refused to. My brothers and sisters, we used to argue and fight. We did. My parents did, but we did when they weren't there. It was on and popping. I'm telling you, it was. And my brothers, my older brothers, were in charge of me and my sister. So imagine I'm out playing and my brother roll up and say, go home. And I ain't going home and we going back and forth. Yeah, that was an issue. And to this day, I'm not going to do too much arguing. I'm going to say what I have to say and I'm going to move on because my childhood trauma was sibling rivalry and arguing. It was. That's the reality. That's real. And for those of you who didn't experience that, good luck with that. So I seek spaces like therapy. I did therapy. I went into therapy initially for grief because I had lost so many people. So many people in my life died. I needed grief therapy. And in that grief therapy, I got some of the stuff I needed to deal with the childhood trauma. You know, the over sanitizing things, the sibling rivalry, the parents not arguing, acting as if everything was okay, when in fact it wasn't. So I journal and I have trusted conversations. I'm going to repeat that: trusted conversations. Because you can't tell everybody everything, but you have to unpack. Because even though we don't talk about the childhood trauma, we're carrying it. And not just me, you too. So get honest with yourself. If you want to feel better about yourself, if you want to regain the confidence that you actually once had, believe it or not, I don't care what went on. I don't care who hurt you. I don't care how much you stumbled, fumbled, how much people fumbled you. If you need help, go and get it. In my grief, I almost completely lost myself. My mother, my father, both my sisters, my husband, a best friend, a sister in law, two mother in laws, two brothers, friends. I've lost a ton of people, nieces, nephews. One of my nephews was murdered by police officers in Virginia. And however that works out, he was murdered, right? And so I have to seek safe places. And if I seem intolerant of nonsense, I am. And I'm intolerant because I've learned where my safe spaces are. I've had some family trauma, I've had some dysfunction. However, the one thing I love about my family is we didn't sweep it under the rug. My parents swept their fights under the rug. But as a whole, we didn't sweep our differences, our difficulties, our misunderstandings, our fights. We didn't sweep that under the rug. We dealt with it. And it wasn't always easy, but we did it. And so, what I want you to know tonight, what I'd like you to take away from this is that we can't normalize dysfunction, but we have to accept that in every family, there's some normal behavior that we might not always consider right. Fighting with your siblings, your parents having disagreements, your mother and father, doing their thing, whatever it is, right? But we can't sweep it under the rug. If it hurt us, we have to deal with it because our childhood hurts can and will destroy us if we let it. So I want you to know this. My therapist told me in grief therapy, she said, you might walk around as if everything is okay and you're looking good and you're smelling good and you're acting good. But deep down inside, those things that hurt you and that childhood trauma, right? We see it. It shows up in your behavior. So when you're acting insecure and you don't know it, those of us who have found our safe space and we're good, we can see it. We can see it. You're suspicious of everybody and everything. We can see it. You have to control everything. We can see it. You're running off and doing things with people that you don't belong with. We can see it, right? But that's your story to tell. I just told mine to the best of my ability and with honesty, transparency, and truth. My family wasn't perfect, but they were normal. And there were times when we didn't think that we were normal, but we were, in fact. We ate every day. We were well cared for. We had a spotless house. And my mother and father were in the home. They were pretending that everything was okay. I'm going to give you that. But as the kids in the home, we did what we needed to do to open our eyes and see. And therapy for grief taught me how to seek spaces that protected my peace. And let me tell you a few things about what I do to protect my peace. I don't argue with people anymore. I don't waste energy on one sided relationships. See, that protects my peace. I learned that in therapy because of grief, right? That protects my peace. I don't deal with that. I don't overcommit my time when I know I don't have time. I accepting and excusing toxic behavior is not what I do. You do something inappropriate, you disrespect me, I'm going to call you on it. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to agree with it, but baby, I'm going to call you on it. I'm telling you, I am. And I'm not going to go back and forth and I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not allowing any dysfunctional person, place, or thing. It could be family, friends, or foe. You're not going to disrupt my peace. You're not going to rob that. You're not going to rob me of that. I'm not trying to fix other people. That's not an act of love. That's an act of rebellion and misunderstanding. The only person I can fix is myself. And the same goes for you. You can only fix yourself. Stop trying to fix other people. You know, um, Pretending to be happy when I'm hurting. No, if I'm hurting or I'm feeling sad, I have a few people, I won't call their names on this podcast, that I can call up and say, hey, I'm struggling. Hey, I don't understand this. Hey, this doesn't work for me. Hey, I'm bored. Hey, I don't know what they're doing, but it's not what I do. I can't do it. I don't have a problem doing that. I'm not pretending and I'm not silencing my voice. I have learned to be more respectful, right? In my tone and inflection when I'm sharing that you will not violate my peace, my boundaries, or pull me into misunderstandings. I'm not pretending to be happy when I'm not. I'm not silencing my voice. I'm not overthinking. I'm not holding on to people I've outgrown. There's some people who thought they walked away from me when in fact I let them go long before they left because I knew I'd outgrown them. And perhaps they'd outgrown me as well. Because if the door swings both ways, that's something you forget too, right? I'm not just going along to get along. These are things I stopped doing to protect my peace, right? I'm not overlooking my blessings or my lessons. I'm not comparing myself. I'm not abandoning myself. I'm not waiting for external validation. Validation begins with me from the inside out. Validation for anything else is parking. That's right, unless you have a driver. It's parking, right? I'm not trying to change people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I'm going to let you stay right where you are. Hey, my name is Net. I want to thank you for joining me here this evening at Word on the Curve. Family trauma is passed down. Family trauma is often normalized. Family trauma exists in 95% of families. There's a 5% uh, group of people and families who they're perfect, or at least they say they are. Oh, we never had any trouble. My father, my mother, there's 95% of us who have to work on healing and feeling and not abandoning ourselves in the process. Hey, it doesn't have to be deep. Take care of yourself. Just do it. Self care matters. It got me through. It got me through. Our next podcast coming up is going to be about unspoken impotence and the impact that it has in relationships and on families. Are you ready for it? Yeah, you said you were. You asked for it, and we're bringing it to you live. And after that, we're doing unspoken on infidelity. And after that, we're doing unspoken on menopause. Ladies, get ready because there's a huge misunderstanding with impotence and menopause, with the men and the women, and it's something that we have to talk about. Hey, we don't want to talk about it, but we need to talk about it. And Word on the Curve podcast is going to do just that. We'll see you again soon. Have a great evening. And again, thank you for joining me. I'm Annette. I am your host, and I am grateful to share this time with you. Good night.